Hi, this is Nasser from NQ, and today I would like to talk about the FJ40 digital cluster. More specifically, when you order the digital cluster, what all you will receive with it, how it all fits together, works together, and some things to be aware of and be careful of when you are installing your FJ40 digital cluster from NQ. So we'll start off with the most important part, which is the cluster itself. Here we have the stainless steel version of the cluster. This particular version was made on special order for our customer in Malaysia, Borneo Land Cruiser. And as you may have read in the specification sheet, this one has a stainless steel body. It's got the standard 5-inch touchscreen and 1.3-inch OLED displays for fuel, oil, temperature, and power. When you receive this cluster, it'll be wrapped inside of bubble wrap, protective bubble wrap, and temperature and wrap that will prevent it from getting bumps and from high temperatures. The cluster itself is very straightforward. In another video later on, I'll show you how to operate it and use it and set it up. But this is the device itself. The unit comes with a single connection at the back. It is an RJ45 connection, and you can this connects it to the sender unit, which we'll talk about in a minute. And just a word of caution here, when you receive the cluster, it will come with these standard M6 hex bolts. These are 30 millimeter in length. You can replace them with your own M6 bolts, which should be longer because this has to sit, this will protrude outside the body, but the bolts have to go into the original body of the FJ40 cluster area. Then this is simply plug and play and bolt it in, and you're good to go. So yeah, that's the main unit. And then we'll yes, another word of caution, this RJ45 connector, do not connect this to any kind of Ethernet switch or Ethernet device. Okay, it's a different configuration, it's not the same. So we don't want to damage anything, or, if you do, it will, it may potentially damage the device. So please do not do that. Now, what that connects to and what is the main brains of the digital cluster is the outer sending unit. This here is partially assembled, by which I mean there is a tester power connection, and the cable you see here, the rainbow colored ribbon, that is the GPS and compass. But before I get to all that, I'll just go through the device. So this device connects to your speedometer, your tachometer, fuel, oil, as well as your temperature sensor on a standard FJ. It also has on this side connections for left indicator, right indicator, as well as hazard and brake lights. There are two optional connectors. One of these is used for the 4x4. So if you connect the sensor line from the 4x4, it will light up a 4x4 indicator on the display. And the second one is a custom indicator which turns the display, the hazard light, magenta. So that's anything that you want to do, an engine light or a seatbelt light. Just one thing that you must note is these are all based on positive signal. So 12 volt or 24 volt positive signal has to come in here, and they will send the appropriate signal across to the cluster. Down here is very straightforward. We have two basic connections. This is your main power. Now it's labeled 12 volt, and next to it is ground, which you can see from the red and black cables. This can be 24 volt as well, because this device is built in such a way that it can support 12 up to 36 volts technically, but be restricted between 12 and 24. So you can use it in the old 24 volt trucks as well. Right next to it is a male DB9 connector, and this you can use to connect to an OBD2 port, which will allow you to get your speed and RPM directly from the engine, which is the basics that OBD2 gives you. And for that purpose, you will also receive this with your order, which is a DB9 female to OBD2 connector cable. It's a very high quality cable, and this is part of your order. Also on the other end, as you can see, as I showed you earlier on the back of the gauge, there is an FJ45 connector. There's also another DB9 connector here. This is as a backup in case your FJ45 on the gauge gives you problems or breaks, which it shouldn't because it's made of industrial grade material. But in case you ever have any problems with this connector, you can actually switch to a DB9 connector which has the same pin outs, and you can either map it to FJ45 or there is a DB9 port on the gauge cluster which can be activated. At the front of the cluster, we just have our logo, a light that tells you when the cluster is at the front of the sending unit, we have our logo and a light that tells you when the unit is on, and a small OLED display which gives you rotating inputs in terms of what's going on with the fuel sensor, the temperature, oil, speedometer, RPM, battery, as well as then it shows if you are moving and your GPS is connected, it'll show you a speed, a precise speed in kilometers per hour. Also, if your OBD2 is connected and activated, it'll let you know what your OBD2 status is. We'll get to see more of that later in another video. So this is the sending unit. Now I'll just show from this side once. As I said, you have sensors labeled fuel, temperature, oil. Now these are all resistive to ground, which is the standard type of sensor that comes with most FJ40s or older cars. So these should go directly into your fuel, temperature, and oil that comes with your engine. Do not put positive signal cables here because you might risk shorting. But you wouldn't short something, but you may overload something. Similarly, you have for the speed. Now for speed, we use a connection to a VSS, a 12 or 24 volt VSS. VSS stands for a vehicle speed sensor, which I'll show you in a second. One vehicle speed sensor comes included, a Toyota speed sensor comes included in your purchase. So the order of the connection is ground, signal, and positive, which is clearly written there. So please do not reverse these last two because then you can potentially short out the board. Similarly for RPM, though we have included the exact same connection, generally in RPMs you use ground and signal. Specifically for the sensor that we provide, you only need ground and signal. It fits into the bell housing and it picks up pulses from your flywheel. However, if you want to tap into the distributor or you want to tap into the alternator, you would just use the signal, and you can use ground here or you can ground it on the other side, any other part of the car, and it should be fine. The positive is included as optional. You can use it or you can just seal it up with some silicone so that it doesn't create any issues. And that's the sender unit. And now let's move on to the remaining sensors. And of course, before I do that, I'll show you the GPS here. Now the GPS unit is sealed inside this. It has both the compass and the GPS. If you can make it out, there's a directional arrow on top, 3D printed into this. That should always be pointing north. When you receive your order, you will have a better labeled unit than this, so it'll tell you which way is straight up. So when you position it, and you will also receive a double-sided 3M tape to stick this to the body of your car or the inside of your dash, as long as it has a clean line of sight so that it can pick up a satellite signal. This should always be pointing to the front of your car so that your compass gives you an accurate reading of where you are headed. So yeah, just something to be wary of over there. Finally, there are several cables and cable harnesses that come with your system. Just as an example, here's two of them. This is the power cable. You can extend it to whatever length you need, but this should go into the ignition, and this side should go into the sender unit that I just showed you, and the other side should go into your ground, and as well as the power coming from your ignition. Don't plug this into the battery, otherwise your gauge will stay on all the time. It does not have a manual cutoff, so connect this to your accessories or your ignition. It's clearly labeled 12 volt and ground, but you can, as I said, you can use up to 24 volts. Similarly, for temperature, fuel, and oil, we provide a cable harness, which is about 4 feet in length, just shy of 4 feet. With the crimped end that we're giving you, you can put into the sensor, and the other end you can extend with your own cable. You just have to respect the what goes where in terms of the color coding and the labels. So if you're extending for example, if you're extending the green cable here, so you would take that to your temperature sensor from this end. Similarly, this is a cable harness that we're providing of some length, along with the Toyota VSS. Now, this is a common VSS that is used in vehicles from 1996 onwards. It goes into your transfer case. It's often found on Land Cruisers, Hiluxes, and most of the transfer cases that came in from the mid-90s onwards. We also provide an older VSS, or rather a VSS that's compatible with older transfer cases, which we've tested on the FJ40. But both of them, both of these VSSs do the same thing. They send pulse signals to your sender unit, which then converts them into the speed of your vehicle. Just on that note, the speed of your vehicle is determined by two inputs. One is this, and the other is the GPS. So if this is missing from your system, no problem. You will still get speed. It'll be coming from the GPS so long as you have a good, strong GPS signal, or a stable GPS signal. Once it gets a signal from this, it will use the speed from GPS to calibrate this, or you can also manually calibrate this if need be. Similarly, we also ship this universal tach sensor. Now, what makes it universal is that this nut here can be adjusted to the depth of your bell housing. This goes into your bell housing, and it basically picks up pulses from the flywheel. The teeth of the flywheel, as they move by this, it sends pulses through this 2-point signal back to the sender unit. So one of these is ground and one of these is signal. We will mark those when we send them to you on the in the package. But you position this inside your bell housing. If there is a hole there, if there isn't, you can get a mechanic or someone with equipment to make you one. You screw this in until you feel it tap against the flywheel, which means you are as far as you can go, and then you need to screw it out so that you're about 180 degrees or half a turn or one full turn depending away, so that the flywheel can move freely without touching this, and that will give it enough magnetic signal to pick up and send back a pulse. And once you do that, you tighten the nut on the outside. We will eventually put up a video of how this works, but you can find a lot of resources on this on the internet. This is a very common flywheel magnetic pickup sensor. So yeah. And finally, it's important to note that we also ship a 3-foot Category 6 Ethernet cable. It's a little bit more rigid than the standard Category 5s that you find out there. It's a good quality cable, and we would recommend that this is the length and the type of cable you use. If this cable goes bad, you can go to the market and buy another one. But again, please make sure to remain within this length and within this category, because if this cable is longer, there can be signal and power degradation, and although your sender unit will work properly, your gauge may not work properly. So we can guarantee that. This is tested and proven. It works absolutely fine every single time. So please stick to this, and also make sure that when you plug it into both sides, that they are, the connection is snug, and it should not be bent or twisted either way, up or down. It should be a clear line out from the rear of the gauge, and similarly a clear line out from the sender unit.